Hi, friend. David here from Learn Stage Lighting. And as you can see, we're on a stage, we've got a band, and we are ready to run lights. So, what are we talking about today? Well, today we are talking about how do you run lights live from a console? Because last week we talked about with band lighting was running things from stage using a program called DMXs, using Ableton, and that could even extend to MIDI triggering other consoles from Ableton. But the other side of the coin, the other type of lighting that we often run into is when you've got a band that you're lighting. Okay, maybe the band's big enough that it makes sense to hire someone to run the lighting. Often this happens because the band's big enough, they've got enough like backline gear on stage that they need to hire somebody to help set that up, and then, well, might as well have them run lights, right? So, how do you do a great job at it? Well, let me tell you, when you're running things from a console, there are really two ways to look at it. You can pre cue out specific songs, or you can punt and run things on the fly. Now, each has their own advantage. If you pre cue your songs, you're going to have lighting that's custom tailored to the music and is very simple to play back within the show. The downside to this approach is that if the band plays something that you weren't prepared for, changes the song, or just completely improvises or, does something special, you're going to have to come up with something to fill that space, and you won't have that pre-cued. And so even if you're using this approach, which is a great approach, by the way, don't let me underestimate that. Pre-queuing songs for a band is the best way to be able to get a light show that is very in sync and very professional looking. In fact, it's how the professionals do it. But then most professionals for most shows also give themselves the ability to punt or to run things on the fly so that if the band improvises, if they do something else, or even for a lot of bands and for a lot of lighting people, they might put the bulk of their programming in a queue list for a specific song, and then they might go ahead and just add on a little extra, extra taps here and there, some flashes, some blinders, some movement, and run that manually depending on what the band's energy is that night and what they emphasize on. The only type of show where you really don't have that improvisation is something where it's really pre-recorded, it's really time coded, really to a very strict track. And one great example is something like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra Christmas show. It's something that it's not pre-recorded by any means, but they have it very dialed in and they do it exactly the same way every night, and the lights follow. But for most people and most bands, that's not the case. And so the first way that I mentioned, I just want to show this to you here, is literally going ahead and having one single cue list. I'll bring it up here, where you play through all of your music. And so it looks something like this. Actually, I'll turn these lights off and we'll play my first look here. So this is my intro look, just an example song here, nothing specific. But this is where, okay, the band's starting this song and it's called whatever. Boom, you play that look to bring them in. Then they hit their pre-chorus, or maybe this is their first verse. They hit their chorus. They hit their next verse. A solo by the lead singer guy. Notice I brought that timing in a little bit slower. That's one trick that I see a lot of professional lighting designers do, and it looks really professional, is to use slower fade times on lights. It makes it look like you really knew what you're doing and you were really anticipating what the band is doing when you use that slower fade time, and you use it so that the fade ends when the music changes. Okay, that's a big thing. And of course, it takes knowing the music a little better. Then we hit maybe a bridge or a second verse, and then we hit maybe our last verse or the end, and we're ready to go into the next song. And this is a great way to program lights for a band. It really is. It allows you to go ahead and simply, I'm just going to clear it out there, simply go ahead and run things in a way that looks complex but is simple for you to play back on the night of show and follow the music perfectly. But if The band likes to do their own thing. If they like to riff or you don't know what music they're going to play, then using what's called a punt page is really the way to go. And in lighting, this is simply just a group of faders. I've brought mine up here. We can see my faders on the bottom of the screen here, as well as in this virtual console look. And we'll go ahead, and a very typical layout for this is to have an intensity fader for each type of light that you've got in your show. Okay, ooh, those are bright. We'll dial those back. And then I like to have faders for my effects. As you can see here, another effect. Those are blinding. Kind of end of song effect. A movement on the stage and a movement in the house. And so that's how I've got my faders set up. And you say, well, David, that's not a show, right? But then I go ahead and I do buttons either on screen or otherwise that are going to allow me to select various positions. And let me just speed up my rate here a little bit. I can go through various different positions, different full colors across my rig, different colors on just my front light, color combinations, and often I program many more of these. Half color setups. And all of these, by the way, do have 2 cues on them so that I can flip between 2 colors in my rig very quickly. And then things with some nice gobos. And so when you put all of this together and you're bumping along to some music, and I have a video called How to Run Lights Live to Music that I'll also link to here. You're able to really go in and just fire this stuff. Touch screens are great, and be able to follow the music perfectly as you go through your show and be able to create that feeling as if you're following the band. You had something pre-programmed, but you don't, and that's called punting. So that's kind of the second way. It is the second way to run lights live for a band. And this is going to apply whether you've got a band, whether you've got a church, whether anything, a DJ, anytime you've got music. So with that, guys, the homework today is, hey, is there really usually homework here? Subscribe here if you haven't already. Tell your friends about Learn Stage Lighting, anybody you know who might be interested with lighting, and then practice what I've learned today and think about, okay, for my lighting show, for my band, does it make sense to run things totally on the fly with nothing pre-programmed? Or should I have a lot of my show pre-programmed? And let me know in the comments below, and have a great day. Thanks.